Hey everyone, I'm going to be reading Whale Song Chapter 4. Societal was a great sea monster, Nana said in her raspy voice. It roamed the land and sea of the Nuka and Kwakiutl peoples. The monster was huge and ugly with two great heads, and it could change into different shapes and sizes. Societal could disguise itself so it could prey upon unsuspecting animals or humans. It was believed that anyone who looked upon this great monster would be turned to stone. She turned her back to us for a moment. When she whipped her head around and roared, I shrieked, toppling backward over the log I was sitting on. "It's a mask," Goldie said with a giggle as she helped me up. I stared at Nana, horrified. Her wrinkled face had been transformed into a terrifying, grotesque creature. The mask was made of wood and painted in dark, bright colors. Spiked black hair sprung from the top, and it had long earlobes and tattoos on its face. But it was the mask's expression that frightened me most. The creature's eyes bulged, its mouth a huge gaping hole, a permanent scream. "My great-great-grandfather once knew a man who met with this monster," Nana said, her voice muffled by the mask. "His body is still frozen in stone, somewhere in the mountains." She hobbled over to a huckleberry bush and picked a handful of the tiny red berries. She crushed them between her hands. It is believed that if a warrior could injure Societal and take some of the monster's blood and rub it on his skin, the blood would make the warrior's skin so strong that no enemy's weapons could pierce it. She rubbed the juice on my arm. So many warriors tried in vain to get some of Societal's blood, and so many men died trying. She removed the mask and looked at me with kind, caring eyes. Great warriors never stop trying. With her strange hair and knowing eyes, Nana made us believe almost anything. She would often watch me during her storytelling, and sometimes I wondered if she was trying to tell me something. Now I know she was. One morning in August, I was surprised to find my mother waiting for me outside on the deck. On the picnic table beside her was a basket filled with fruit and muffins that she had made the night before. "I've decided to come with you today," she announced, "to meet Goldie's grandmother." Nana had been asking about my mother, and I desperately wanted them to meet. My parents had already met Goldie. My mother liked her so much that she often asked my friend if she wanted to stay for a sleepover. Goldie never refused, and she never said no to dinner at my house either. She loved my mother's Italian cooking. I pointed at the basket. "Is that for Nana?" "I wanted to bring her something," my mother said, chewing her bottom lip thoughtfully, "but I don't know if she likes lemon muffins. What do you think, Sarah?" "I think she'll love them." We set off down the path and followed the beach around the bend. We passed the boat dock where a small outboard was moored when the Dixon house finally came into view. The house seemed unusually silent, almost abandoned. Outside, some of Shonda's toys were scattered on the grass, and a half-woven basket sat on a table next to a lawn chair. Hanging from a tree, a wind chime tinkled merrily in the soft breeze. I knocked on the door. "Is anyone here?" No answer. I stepped inside. "Sarah," my mother admonished. "They told me to walk right in," I said. "Sometimes I go for walks in the woods." I looked around her room. The room. On the floor near the rocking chair sat a laundry basket. It was piled high with freshly laundered clothes, a few folded shirts nearby. In the kitchen, something fragrant was brewing on a pot on top of the stove. "Goldie," I yelled, "where are you?" My mother flinched at the sound of my loud voice. "Your door's never closed to friends," I said, grinning. "Nana told me that. Can we wait for them?" "I guess so." It was obvious that she was more than a little uncomfortable over walking into a stranger's home before being invited in. "It's an interesting house," she said, admiring the colorful Indian artwork in black argillite carvings. The Dixon house was made of cedar inside and out. It was small compared to our house. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs. Goldie's parents had the largest one. Goldie and Shonda shared a room, and then there was Nana's. There was also a small loft area just off the upper hall, where Goldie and I slept when I came for a sleepover. The furniture in the living room on the lower floor was old and worn, but very comfortable. A large woven rug in rich amber and forest green tones covered most of the floor between the couch and the fireplace. There was a simple kitchen with a table and 6 chairs crammed into one corner. Copper pots and pans decorated the kitchen walls, and bunches of freshly picked herbs wrapped with twine hung on hooks to dry. "I'm sure they'll be back soon," I said anxiously. My mother glanced at her watch. "We'll wait just a few more minutes." We sat down at the kitchen table, and I stared at the clock on the wall. 10 minutes passed. Then we heard voices and footsteps. "Sarah," Nana called from outside. "Are you in there, child?" Goldie, Shonda, and Nana stepped inside. "How'd you know it was me?" I asked Goldie's grandmother. The old woman winked. "Birds told me." My mother smiled and reached out a hand. "I'm Sarah's grandmother, Daniela Richardson." Nana did something that shocked me. She brushed away my mother's offered hand and engulfed her in a hug. My mother didn't quite know what to do. I hid my face so that I wouldn't burst out laughing. What an odd sight they made, my tall, slim mother gripped in a bear hug by a short, plump Indian woman. "Call me Nana," the old woman said. "Everyone does." "I'm so glad you came to visit me," she smiled. "Daniela, that's a very pretty name." Thank you, my mother replied. Goldie tugged at my hand. Let's go down to the beach. I looked over my shoulder and saw Nana opening the basket my mother had brought. She pulled out a lemon muffin and bit into it hungrily while they chatted about our move to Canada. Watching the two women, I was happy that my mother had someone she could talk to. I knew she missed her parents who were vacationing in Italy. We brought Shonda with us down to the beach and watched the little girl play on the sand at the water's edge. She found some baby crabs in a small pool of water and brought them over to show us. She was a happy child with big black eyes. Sometimes she would gaze across the bay, and I wondered if she was thinking of her brother. Do you miss Robert? I asked Goldie. She nodded and stared toward Fallen Island. I miss his laughter the most. He was always telling funny jokes and playing pranks on Nana. One time he hid her herbs, and when she went to hang them in the kitchen, she thought she'd never pick them at all. So she went back into the garden and cut some more. What did Robert do? He hid those too, she replied with a wide grin. When Nana went to hang the second bunch, she thought she was losing her mind because she couldn't find them either. She walked around the house muttering, Now where did I put those darn herbs? I picked them, didn't I? It was hilarious. I laughed at her impression of her grandmother. What was Robert doing? I asked. He pretended he was asleep on the couch, but when Nana went back out into the garden a third time, he burst out laughing. Did she catch him? Goldie nodded. You should have seen her. She marched back into the house with 2 buckets full of herbs, caught him laughing, and realized right away what he'd done. When she put the buckets on the floor by the couch, and the next thing he knew, Robert was being hauled up by his ear. I giggled. Was he grounded? No, Nana had better punishment. She made him sit down at the kitchen table and gave him a ball of twine and some scissors. She told him he had to divide each kind of herb into 3 piles, tie them with twine, and hang them. It was so funny. I bet he didn't think so. Well, first he complained, said he didn't want to waste his time hanging weeds. When Nana told him that the 3 piles represented the 3 times she wasted going out into the garden to pick them. Did he do it? What do you think? She asked Riley. Can you imagine anyone not doing what Nana asks them to do? Her laughter was infectious. I giggled so hard my sides ached, and Goldie laughed until she looked like she was going to cry. Suddenly, a branch snapped behind us. We shifted our giggles and turned around. What are you laughing at? My mother asked, stepping out from the trees. Beside her stood Nana. I gave her an innocent smile. Nothing, Mom, just girl stuff. Goldie muffled a snicker beside me, and I jabbed her. Your mother's invited me for tea, Nana said, her eyes strangely serious. Goldie and I exchanged thrilled looks. When we watched her grandmother and my mother stroll side by side down the beach, Nana with her coal-black hair loose from its braid, and my mother with her fiery auburn hair tied in a casual ponytail. They were an intriguing, peculiar pair. That summer, 2 friendships were born. Goldie and I became the best of friends, seldom arguing about anything, and Nana and my mother exchanged visits a couple of times a week. I knew that their friendship was real the day that my mother invited Nana to enter her secret domain. In fact, Goldie's grandmother was the only person to see my mother's first Vancouver Island painting before it was ever even finished. My mother was captivated by Nana's Nootka legends, and the new painting was a tribute to them. It featured a magnificent gray wolf looking into a crystal pool of water while a young Indian girl's face stared back in the reflection. It was mystically beautiful, and my mother refused to sell it. Instead, she made prints and sent them off to the gallery. The director of Visions requested more paintings with similar themes, and I hardly saw my mother for the next 2 weeks, except for when she visited Nana. During one of those last visits before school started, Nana prepared a delicious lunch of venison stew and biscuits. We ate outside under a towering forest of trees. We listened to the squawking seabirds and the restless waves crashing upon the shore. Afterward, we picked huckleberries. My mother laughed when Shonda came back with a nearly empty bucket, her mouth reddened by berry juice. That was the summer I became Indian, at least in spirit. Nana even gave me my own Indian name, Hainayu. One evening, we sat around a huge bonfire and had a special naming ceremony. Nana sang strange words in her native tongue and brushed my face with an eagle's feather. I was fascinated. When I asked her where the name came from, she told me the legend of Copper Woman and Copper Woman's granddaughter, Hainayu. Copper Woman had been alive for many generations, her body still young to look upon. She felt tired and ready to move on and to do other things she could not do in human form. Hainayu went with her grandmother and learned about wisdom and life. Nana pulled a copper ring from her pocket and gave it to me. Copper Woman told Hainayu that wisdom must always be passed on from woman to woman, no matter what color their skin. Copper Woman told her granddaughter that all people come from the same blood, and blood is sacred. She gave me a handful of huckleberries. Hainayu promised to become the guardian of the wisdom and to share it when her time came. Then Copper Woman walked the beach alone and became Old Woman. She tossed something into the fire, and the fire flared. Her bones turned into a loom and a broom, she said. I loved that story, and I adored Nana even more for giving me that extraordinary name. Hainayu, the wise one of the one who knows. From that moment on, Haina Yu was the only name she called me. I often wondered why she picked that particular name. I sure didn't feel very wise back then.